And they will have 1 minute for the response. If I ask a follow-up question, the candidate will have 1 minute to respond. Following the question and answers, each candidate will have 1 minute each for a closing statement. This debate features candidates for the school committee race, and this year we have 3 candidates running for 2 available seats. With us this evening include candidates Amanda Fargiano, Meg Tyler, and Jared Prey. The order of the candidates who answer each question will rotate, with the initial order having been drawn by random chance. So we'll get started. We'll get right into the questions. Question 1, what is the most important qualification for a school committee member? Give an example that shows you possess this quality and how it will impact your effectiveness on the board. Amanda, you can answer first.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to HCAM for hosting this debate. So the most effective, the most important qualification, I would say, would be just being able to process a wide breadth of information, breadth and depth of information across many, many topics, and to digest that information quickly and to pull out the relevant, sort of actionable points so that you can make decisions and guide the district forward. You can imagine in a job that deals, sort of oversees a $54 million budget covering facilities and hiring and curriculum and special ed and mental health. There's a breadth of topics that you really need to become conversant on quickly. So I think it's important to be able to commit and do the work. I think that is something that I am actually, I like to do. I like to process information. I like to do that analysis, and I like to figure out sort of with a level head where to go with that information to help lead the district.
All right, excellent. Meg, same question. What is the most important qualification for a school committee member? Give an example that shows you possess this quality and how it will impact your effectiveness on the board. Let me now answer, Meg.
Thank you, Tom. One quality that I think is absolutely crucial is the ability to listen and then to integrate into your own thinking opposing points of view. The 5 of us have very strong personalities on the school committee, and we have to talk about a lot of very sensitive topics and very important topics. We don't always agree with each other, but I have learned so much from listening closely, especially to points of view that I don't agree with. As you know, in the past year, we have struggled a lot with trying to decide what to do in the face of the pandemic. A particularly trying experience, I think, for all of us was being on the reopening full-time committee and listening to people who were so eager to get their kids back into school and people who were really fearful of that prospect too. And I think that we all have strong emotions. Whether we illustrate that or not, we have them. And I think part of listening well is learning not to react to how you're feeling in that moment, but to be able to acknowledge the feeling in yourself, but still try to synthesize the information. And as Amanda said, to remain level-headed. A lot of this is about listening, waiting, and then trying to do the right thing through the use of reason.
All right, terrific. And Jared, what is the most important qualification for a school committee member? Give an example that shows you possess this quality and how it will impact your effectiveness on the board.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom, for the question. So, similar to Amanda, I think the most important quality is kind of the ability to, intake, understand and ultimately synthesize information. The one point I'd add to that is ultimately being comfortable making a decision and moving forward. I think that there's a lot of information out there, certainly now, whether it's, sourced in so many different places, but I think it's so important that not only just listening, not only gathering all of that data, but ultimately being able to move forward decisively. And I think, as we look what's most important, I think that kind of paralysis, just sitting, waiting, I think it's difficult, it's difficult for the town, it's difficult for the students. And ultimately, I think it's difficult for progress and moving forward. Career-wise, I work in the pharmaceutical industry, which is an area that is filled. It's we literally live and die by data. So it's so important that you're able to make a decision with something like 60-80% of the data. Make a decision, move on, continue to learn more. If you learn that last 10 to 20%, you learn a little bit more. It's okay to change direction. It's okay to change course a little bit, but ultimately to make a decision and move forward.
All right, terrific. We'll move on to our next question. If elected, what are your top priorities? We'll start off with Meg first for this one.
Well, my top priority is to ensure that the students and the teachers have enough support as this pandemic, we hope, draws to a close. And I think there will be emotional and psychological repercussions. I think that the administration, as it exists, already has a lot of great ideas and plans in place to support the students and the teachers. But I think we need to be honest about the impact that the pandemic has had on each of us, particularly the students who've had their routines disrupted, and adult fears circulating in the air a lot of the time, including, especially this week. So I think as we move forward, we really need to make sure those supports are in place for the kids in particular, because they don't announce their stress in the same ways that we do. I'd also like to make sure that the students on IEPs and with special needs continue to get the support that they are getting right now. We have 500 students on IEPs, and we've been particularly lucky in this district because this year, those students were allowed to go to school 5 days a week. In many districts of Massachusetts, that was not the case. So it was an extraordinarily generous gesture, I think, on the part of the administration, while all of these teachers have been under so much stress to try to add to their schedules, their hybrid schedules, these 5-day-a-week kids too. But I can see the ways in which that program can continue to be strengthened, to think about the different kinds of learning differences that kids have and make sure that we're acknowledging the value of those differences and not just seeing them as something that detracts from their ability to succeed academically. So I hope that we will pursue, as we are already, a thoughtful curriculum in reading and writing, particularly for elementary students who may not be keen eye readers, but good ear readers. Thank you.
Okay, Jared, if elected, what are your top priorities?
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. So as we think about the past 12 months, as we look forward, it's so important that we focus a lot on the social emotional health of the children, first of all. One thing that, kind of keeps sticking in my mind, and I don't have high school students myself, but the survey that the district sent out, February or March or so, and it was just disheartening to see how many of the high school kids said that they were in kind of a tough spot from a social and emotional perspective. So I think that's probably most important. But secondly, as we think beyond COVID and we think about moving the district forward, it's important to think about what has gotten us to be that's one of the top districts in Massachusetts that we are today, and how to ultimately how to keep us there. A lot of it's to do with investments to make sure the community remains invested. And then as we think about the enrollment growth, how are we, from a space planning perspective, how are we going to continue to, physically fit everyone to meet our space needs as a district? Thank you, Tom.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Amanda, if elected, what are your top priorities?
As has already been mentioned, I think first and foremost, it's the pandemic recovery. This is not something that we do with a flick of a switch. I mean, this is going to take time and investment. We have kids who'll be coming back together, who are already back together, who had very diverse experiences during the pandemic, and bringing those kids together, rebuilding our beautiful culture that we have in our schools and our cohesiveness in the classrooms is going to take time. And we're starting it this spring, and I'm thankful for that, but it's going to take a lot of work in the fall as well, and throughout next year. So pandemic recovery, both academically, social, emotionally, mental health, across the board for students and for staff. Beyond that, this is a difficult week. It's been a difficult year in many ways, and I think, again, just looking at how we support, as Meg had said, our students. All of our students, our high achievers, our struggling learners, our socioeconomically disadvantaged learners, our learners from other cultures or races. We're all Hopkinton, and we're all, one town, one community, and we really have done a lot of work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a lot more work to do, and so there's a huge focus for me is in that area. I think if I'm looking, my third and fourth very practical priorities are around both growth and managing the growth, the projected enrollment growth for the next 10 years, adding about 900 or so more students. I'm very excited about the campus planning initiative that we will hopefully pass town meeting, and really looking thoughtfully at how we use our facilities and our spaces to encompass a 21st century education. Our priorities around STEM, around arts, around athletics, around music. We are always, we have so many areas that the community is very proud of. And I want to make sure our facilities enable us to shine and continue to build those programs in a way, again, with the budget that manages our budget, which is always a challenge.
All right, thank you very much. All right, moving on to the next question. And I also just want to say this year has certainly been a hard year for many, and I think that is certainly what makes dedicated volunteers like yourselves very important. From your perspective, what do you feel will be the biggest obstacles the school committee will face in the immediate future as we follow the COVID-19 pandemic? Jared, you can answer this one first. Jared, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, there you go.
So specifically in regards to the pandemic, I think it's getting back to, quote unquote normal. It's great to see kids back in school. It's great to see the high school kids back in school. But as we look at our youngest learners, for years we saw them kind of grouped together at tables, having reading buddies and working together on reading. And now to see them, because we need to at this point, spread apart. But at what point do we think about doing what's ultimately best for them as learners? I know ultimately, likely the state, CDC, whoever it is, dictates a lot of that, but to see how that evolves and how that changes. So academically, as the kids evolve, and that's really, I think, our biggest challenge coming out of this from a pandemic perspective.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, from your perspective, what do you feel will be the biggest obstacles the school committee will face following COVID-19?
Specific to COVID-19, I think, it's always our goal, and I think now it's extra challenging to meet each student where they are, and then to help them be their best selves. And so coming out of the pandemic, we have some students who may have been fully remote and may have engaged in college coursework or, third-party coursework. They may have excelled beyond grade level. For example, there are definitely students in our community who have done that. We have students in our community who struggled just to, pay attention on Zoom. It's a format that's not natural for a lot of students. It's not a natural way to learn. We have kids who, as a consequence, have struggled and maybe slipped behind. And so taking this full breadth, it's across the spectrum of students, coupled with wherever they are emotionally, and meeting them there and then helping them to sort of move forward, living with COVID. And it's not going to be normal right away. In the fall, we're still going to be living with COVID. We're going to have kids who are vaccinated, kids who aren't vaccinated. We don't know where the variants are going to be. It's going to be living with COVID and moving forward and, finding, our own paths, each child's own path and supporting that. So I think that work for some will begin over the summer. I think we have a lot of thought about, the administration has a lot of thoughts about how we sort of do that in the fall, but it's going to take time.
Okay, thank you. Meg, from your perspective, what do you feel will be the biggest obstacles the school committee will face in the immediate future following COVID-19?
Thank you, Tom. I think the biggest obstacle we face right now is anxiety and fear on the part of the community, the teachers, the administration, and the kids, because we've had to adapt so quickly to very difficult circumstances. And most everyone right now is still suffering from the trauma inflicted by the pandemic, which, as we all know, has caused a real rift in the community. We've seen that, we feel it right now, that there is not as easy a sense of trust in others and how they might have an effect on our lives. So I think we really need to work on rebuilding trust with the teachers. We need the kids to feel that they can trust the schools to be there, to support them, to help allay their anxiety. We need the administration to be able to trust that we are still there to support them too, and that we're not going to throw them under the bus when any problems occur. So I think just the residual fear and anxiety in our population are our biggest hurdles ahead. We have great teachers academically. I don't think scholarship is going to falter for long. I don't think our students have regressed so immeasurably that it's going to take us years to catch them up. Our teachers are so skilled, I think that's going to happen quite quickly. But the kind of emotional aftermath of this pandemic, we need to find ways to help everyone comprehend it, to express it, and to engage with it with less fear, less anxiety.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next question is, do you support the current state COVID-19 guidelines? And if there is anything that you would have done different if it was up to you, could you explain? Amanda, we'll start off with you.
So which are you talking about, sort of the DESE, the education statewide guidelines, or the governor's guidelines?
The governor's guidelines, the guidelines allowing the schools to pretty much reopen.
Okay. I am 100% behind where we are right now with our schools open, with students in the classroom. We've churned through lots of data, and I say we, and it really was Meg on our behalf sat on the full-time return committee, and along with her committee members, churned through a lot of information that justified and proved and showed that, it is very safe to sit in a classroom, to sit on a bus, if it's well ventilated, with a mask, with hand hygiene, and to participate in school. And our kids need this. They've needed it for a long time. I think they're showing that they're loving. We're hearing a lot of good feedback. Kids are very happy to be back. I think the schools are very safe. We've put a lot of time, effort, and money into protocols that manage the flow of traffic in the hallways, that have this hand sanitizer literally everywhere. There, mask wearing and mask breaks. So to me, the schools are a safe place to be. When I think about all the places I think that I go, grocery store, work, or whatever. I mean, the schools are a great, safe place to be. In terms of I'm trying to think of the other state guidelines recently. So the mask policy outside, I think, has been recently changed at the state level. For the district at the moment, we are retaining our mask policy on campus. So we still have a mask requirement on campus, although I think that is under review by the policy working group, Meg. But I think that Governor Baker is cautious, but science driven in his reopening. And I think that's sort of how we handled it in Hopkinton with the schools. We're cautious, but science driven. And there is no reason, is my opinion, the risk of kids not being in school is far greater than having the kids in school right now.
Okay, thank you. Meg, do you support the current state COVID-19 guidelines, and is there anything you felt should have been done differently?
Thank you. I think Amanda has already quite beautifully articulated what we were working with on the school committee over the past year, with various guidelines coming at us at different junctures and trying to adapt to them. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, so I have to trust the guidelines as they're passed down to us from the authorities. And yet at the same time, I'm an avid reader and a researcher. And throughout the pandemic, I've been trying to get hold of as many studies as I can about social distancing. And throughout, I wasn't entirely convinced that our elementary students needed to remain at 6 feet masked. And so perhaps I would have liked to have seen them return a little bit earlier. But I also know that there was a lot of fear and anxiety on behalf of other parties. And, as school committee members, we have to respect that. We can't just, assume that our opinion is the right way to go and forge ahead. I think the current guidelines are very good. I know that there have been a couple questions about the quarantining changes that some parents feel as if we should be more thorough in quarantining students who've been exposed to contacts, which means to be within a 6-foot radius or a 3-foot radius for 15 minutes. So that is still to be determined and to be discussed. But I know that all of the decisions we make are decisions that we make in concert together. And so I really don't feel as if I'm someone who can prize apart all of the work that's been done and think that, oh, I would have done it better this way, because that frankly just wouldn't be true. I really have great colleagues on the school committee. You have never seen people work so hard as they have in this past year. I mean, 40-hour weeks, especially Amanda, who just rocks it. So I feel incredibly privileged to be in this team of good, sound, thoughtful people who.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared, do you support the current state COVID-19 guidelines, and is there anything you felt should have been done differently?
Yes, to be clear, very enthusiastically support the state guidelines. I think, in many ways, the state's done an excellent job of, there were so many unknowns when this all started. I think the state started conservative. I think it was, certainly the right place to go. And as we've learned more, as there's been more data available, has been able to, update, relax, and, and continue to grow again with the data that's been available. So very much so, yes, support the state guidelines. If there's anything I would have done just differently, I think it would have been how the district reacted to those guidelines. One of the problems or one of the concerns that I had, is it was really hard. It was really hard to look around at the schools around us, to look at Holliston or Wellesley or Dover and see schools that were back, particularly for the youngest learners, well before, in some case, many months before Hopkinton was. To see, kindergartners or first graders in Wellesley back in October, full time for at least 4 days in school. If there's something I would have done differently, it would have been that. We're not talking about a state mandate. The state, there was enough flexibility in there. I mean, certainly a number of other towns were able to accomplish it. So it was disappointing that Hopkinton was not able to. So as I look back on it, I think certainly that's my biggest disappointment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to our next question.
Tom, Amanda wanted to respond to that.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Amanda.
I just wanted to say that exactly how Jared was feeling. I think a lot of us were at one point or another, we've all been kind of looking over our shoulder at other districts. And so back in the winter, I forget when, I pulled together a group of school committee chairs from about 12 districts, just so we could sit down monthly at a round table and say, oh my gosh, what are you doing? How are your kids in? How are your kids not in? And the one thing that I did learn was that there's always a set of circumstances. There's never an exact match across districts, so what works in one district just doesn't work in another. That said, I think we have learned a lot from each other. I think it is important to continue to keep the connections. Our administrative colleagues have their own peer groups, like Dr. Kavanaugh has her peer groups that she checks in with. And I think it is very helpful because, to Jared's point, I mean, we all kind of want to understand best practices and how do we get there. And it's important to keep our eyes open.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to invite our candidates to use the raise hand feature of the chat room if you want to respond, and I don't see that. So feel free to utilize the raise hand feature in the chat room. All right, are we ready to move on to the next question? Okay. So our next question is, do you think COVID-19 will result in permanent changes in the way kids are educated? If so, explain. Meg, you can start off first for this one.
Thank you. What an interesting question, and something I think about because I teach at Boston University and we're having these conversations all the time. It's my understanding that, yes, there are a lot of kids who don't do well on Zoom or being taught through a screen. And so I'm grateful that we'll have the opportunity to bring everybody back to school. But I've also heard that there's some kids who really benefit from having this kind of distance from their peers and the stimuli in the classroom. So I would hope that there would be a way to perhaps incorporate this kind of digital learning in the future. I think we need to have a lot of conversations about how best to do that. I think that in terms of kids who are ill or they have to quarantine for some other reason, hopefully than COVID, well, I don't want anyone to quarantine, that we'd be able to offer them access to the classroom through live streaming, which we've done at university. I've been live streaming to Thailand and China all year. And, it's been a fabulous opportunity, and it's kind of enlarged our audience. And I hope that we'll be able to use these tools in the future, especially for meetings. Isn't it great when you can still wear your pajama bottoms in meetings and you can look very professional from the neck up? Well, I hope that sometimes we'll be allowed to use this for that too. But I think it has shown us that it's better than we thought it would be. It's not ideal. But it has really saved us from a lot of loneliness and isolation this year. So, yeah, I think we've learned a lot from it.
All right, thank you. And I want to say I am definitely wearing dress pants right now, okay? In case
of course, me too, Tom. Me too.
Okay, Jared, do you think COVID-19 will result in permanent changes in the way kids are educated? If so, explain.
So I think in some ways, Tom, it would be disappointing if we didn't look at which aspects of this worked. I think there's probably going to be some surprises as we look at standardized test scores over the year. I mean, I think everybody's expecting that the year, isn't ideal, but there might be some surprises there. And I think it'll be interesting to learn to see what those surprises are and, if it makes sense to adapt anything. That being said, I think the other thing that we've learned here is that, school is, the academic environment, the learning at school, is only a part of school. And, we can argue even what the most important part is, but certainly the social environment, being around your peers, being with friends, making friends, interacting. And I see it a lot with my kindergartner, because, when you think about what you learn in kindergarten, the academics only a small piece of it. So much of kindergarten is kind of like conflict resolution and meeting friends and getting to know people and, interacting in bigger groups. So, I think there's a lot of aspects that likely won't change and, certainly wouldn't expect to change. So.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, do you think COVID-19 will result in permanent changes in the way kids are educated? If so, explain.
Well, I mean, I think both of my fellow candidates have said this, what I will say as well. I think there are really exciting ways that this technology has allowed us to survive the last 18 months. As just people, without it, we couldn't connect at all. Some people have connected communities that didn't exist before, our church live streams, and now we get grandparents going to church with their grandkids, from all over the country. That didn't happen before. There are all these sort of new, sort of interesting things that have cropped up that we didn't think about. I definitely agree with Meg that it would be really nice, as we have students who are unable for whatever, usually often it's a medical issue, but if there's any student who is unable to go to school, we are required to educate these kids, and we want to educate these kids. And rather than send a tutor to a hospital, it'd be great if they could join their colleagues. All of that said, one thing that I think I've really come to appreciate, just kind of being this much closer in the last 3 years to the schools, is that our educators are fabulous. I am not an educator, and our educators are fabulous, and they're innovative, and they will grab tools and technologies that work. They know what works with their kids, and they will grab onto things and use them in ways that I could never even imagine. And so, as a school committee person, I would like to create an opportunity for that creativity to happen, and keep this in the conversation, but really look at our educators who are professionals and dedicated and knowledgeable, and just put it in the toolkit. And let's just see where we go with it. I mean, I think this isn't something that I can imagine. I don't teach, and I'm not an administrator, but there are exciting possibilities. I can think big, and I can dream. I have some ideas. No one's really asking yet, but I hope that we give our educators space and availability to use the tools in the way that they think will benefit the kids, because we can learn from the teachers on this.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to our next question. How important do you feel the school system is to the economic welfare of the town, and can you explain? Jared, you can go first on this one.
Yes, thank you. So I think the school system is truly intertwined with the town. The town and the school system, I don't think you can separate them. I'm for one moved to Hopkinton specifically because of the schools, and I have a hunch that I'm certainly not alone in that there's a lot of people that ended up here in town specifically for that. So what does that do? I mean, certainly that drives demand for housing. It drives demand for, services in town, other businesses in town, things like that. So, the fact that we have historically had a good school system and the importance of maintaining a good school system in the future, I think can't be understated, for the vitality of the town, for the, for the future benefit of the town as well.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, how important do you feel the school system is to the economic welfare of the town, and can you explain, please?
Sure, I agree with everything Jared just said. I think it's central in many ways. Many of our residents have moved here for the schools. And the schools are a big draw, which again, in turn, then elevates property values and, people's assets appreciate. And, it's all good. That's all good. We do well in rankings. Which, I don't know how much, I have my own feelings about rankings, but the reality is people look at that. They look at safety. They look at all the natural beauty of the town, but the schools that are, I think, the number one draw when people are interviewed as to why they're moving here. So aside from money, and I think you asked money, but I'm going to take it a little broader. Aside from money, I think there's a great synergy in town with our schools. I mean, we have so many students who go to Golden Pond and volunteer, or they'll go to Project Just Because and volunteer, or we have seniors who come to a music concert. We hosted a music concert just before the pandemic. It was like the last concert that squeezed in on March 1st, I think, at the HCA with the jazz band. And we invited the seniors and they came over on a bus. And sort of that sharing across generations that happens because our schools are here and they're so strong, really knits together the fabric of the community in a way that it just wouldn't happen without the kind of schools that we have, the kind of kids and families that we have. We also have a really growing CVTE, Career Vocational Technical Ed program, and it's grant funded. But the leader, Ms. Lachansky, is really reaching out to the community and building internship and co-op opportunities and linking businesses to the schools in ways that provide incentive for kids to kind of think about their future and dream big. And so I think all of those connections across the business, across generations, as well as the actual economic impact of the schools, it's all woven together, and it makes Hopkinton a great place to live.
Okay, thank you. Meg, how important do you feel the school system is to the economic welfare of the town, and can you please explain?
I agree completely with what both Jared and Amanda have said, that really the schools are the big draw, and it's why house prices have shot up exponentially, particularly recently. I think that without the population, the specific population that is drawn to Hopkinton, in fact, the town itself would not have flourished economically as much as it has. I think about ventures like the Hopkinton Center for the Arts or Project Just Because, which Amanda brought up. It's because you have all of these well-heeled and well-educated people moving into town who put a lot of energy and effort into the schools and to thinking about how to better the schools and better the community, which lends to the town greater economic value for the people moving in and the people who reside here. I think if the schools were third tier, we would not be doing as well as we are. And our residential tax base certainly wouldn't have increased as much as it has in recent years, especially with the building of legacy farms and hundreds of houses being built and more taxes brought into the community. And you cannot separate the life of the schools from the lives of all those children who have come with these new house purchases, which has been great. It's brought a lot of diversity and innovation to the schools because we have more different ways of seeing and being, which I, and I'm sure all of you, welcome utterly. So we're not doing bad in Hopkinton. Sometimes I wish we had a little bit more economic diversity, and that's going to be super hard to achieve when house prices are so high. This is not Cambridge, it doesn't have different economic levels across Hopkinton as pronouncedly as does a larger city like that. Did I hear your bell, Tom?
You did. I try to keep it a little quiet, but it's just there for a heads up.
Yeah. Next to your dress pants, of course.
Oh, I'm wearing them now. Okay, so our next question. With the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been worry about restoring after-school activities in full, especially in the musical field, such as school band and chorus. How much of a priority do you feel this is? Amanda, you can answer first.
Well, as the mother of two musicians, I have a real soft spot for the music program, and we have a phenomenal music program in Hopkinton. under Mr. Hayes' direction. It has been heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking last year when my senior, I didn't get to go to the Pops concert, which is absolutely, if no one's ever been to the Pops concert at the high school, whenever they get to do it again, you can hear all the ensembles sitting in the cafeteria having snacks and tea. It's really lovely. So I think we have to get our extracurriculars back. Both my boys were also athletes. And so I think for so many kids, they really find their identity, they find their home in their extracurriculars, whether it's soccer, or football, or jazz band, or chorus, or debate club, or robotics, whatever it is. Those are the places where they apply sort of some of the academic stuff they learn in many cases, but they really grow as people. They work in teams, they solve problems, whether your problem is trying to score a goal or your problem is trying to get the robot to accomplish a mission. The kids need their extracurriculars. They're essential to growth and development. And so I know that in the middle school and in the high school, in the 11 years I've been here, the principals have invested an enormous amount of time to build vibrant after-school programs. Mr. Keller has made that a priority from the first year that he was a principal, as is Mr. Bishop. And so the sooner we can get those kids back in person, I mean, many of them have operated on a modified basis. The MIAA rules have been frustrating for many. The putting, I think, a mask on your trumpet. I mean, these things are a little bit awkward, but they happen. And I think kids are happy with whatever they get. But I think we have to make it a priority to get all of our varied activities back in person, up and running as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Meg, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a worry about restoring after-school activities in full, especially in the musical field, such as school band and chorus. How much of a priority do you feel this is?
As Amanda said, I think it's a great priority for a number of reasons, not just as a creative outlet for the students, but we have so many skilled teachers and Mr. Hay. I think we all look forward to Mr. Hay's visits to school committee because he brings so much to the children that their academic classes can't really assist them with and measure. My son is a bass fiddle player, and he's a little guy, but it really means the world to him to play. And this year has been so difficult because he's had to do orchestra practice over Zoom. And so I have no doubt that we're going to make every effort we can to bring the music program back into its fulsome beauty as soon as we possibly can, along with all those great after-school programs. Again, there are just untold riches here in this town outside of those immediate academic offerings. And I know that the parents would not let us keep the music classes and chorus and orchestra away from those kids. Not that we would, but thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Jared, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a worry about restoring after-school activities in full, especially in the musical field, such as school band and chorus. How much of a priority do you feel this is?
Thank you, Tom. Yes, so I think I place a very high priority on it. I think, so much of, as you think back to academic and think about learning, it's, so much of it is kids gaining confidence and kids feeling comfortable. And, these programs help in that way, getting confidence, whether it's in music or whether it's in sports, that in turn helps them academically. So I, place a huge priority on things like music programs, after school sports, other extracurricular activities. So huge, certainly highly important to bring them back. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we have some individual questions. All right, so Jared, you are new to the school committee race. Could you talk about what you would like to accomplish if elected to the school committee, and what skill sets do you bring to the table?
Yes, excellent. Thank you. So, in terms of what I'd like to accomplish, I think what we're looking at is we're starting in a great spot. This isn't about how can, these schools are excellent. It's about how do we maintain, what we have today. And that's been the result of both investment by the community as well as this school committee and previous school committees before this one. So, it's what I think I can bring, what I think we need to do a little bit better job of is, again, and I spoke about it earlier, but the ability to take that data, kind of listen to it, and then move decisively. To be able to make a decision and move forward quickly. And we saw this a little bit in regards to some of the COVID conversations, and as we think about thinking strategically and planning for the future, I think it's important that, again, we think strategically and move forward decisively. And a recent example of that is, when we decided to leverage legacy farms money specifically for the review for the new Elmwood School versus going back to town meeting and seeking that additional $1 million. We have a lot of support for things like that. This town believes strongly in moving these schools forward, and in some ways it would have been nicer to save that legacy farms money for an issue that resulted from kind of mid-year enrollment growth or growth that needed to happen more urgently than something we could have addressed as school committee.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to welcome into everyone watching on HCAM TV. We had that emergency select board meeting tonight, but now we are on HCAM TV as well. And don't worry, if you are missing tonight's debate, it will re-air several times before the upcoming Hopkinton town election. Okay, the next question is for Amanda. Amanda, what do you feel are some of your biggest accomplishments as a current member of the school committee, and what would you like to accomplish in the future?
Let's see, biggest accomplishments. I think, just keeping an even keel, getting through this year right now is and we're not there yet. You think 7 weeks doesn't seem like that long, but every day is sort of a new set of challenges. So I think biggest accomplishments, I think remaining even. I think I'm fair. I think my colleagues would say I'm fairly even, which doesn't mean I'm dispassionate. I think I'm very passionate about the schools, but I'm able to sort of listen to all sides, hear the information, understand people and what they're struggling with, and figure out how to move forward with a good process. But I'm okay with, in some cases, maybe a slightly less than perfect process if we have to move quickly. So I focus on process, but I also focus on outcomes. As chair this year, I've learned, each year I've learned a ton. As chair this year, I've learned an enormous amount. And one of the things that I've learned really that I didn't really appreciate before this year is the interconnectedness of this body, the school committee, the select board, the youth and family services, the public safety officials, our legislators, our great state legislators, Representative Dykema and Senate President Spilka, in ways that are sort of new to me. I've connected and really seen the importance of those connections across all the boards and commissions in town, as well as the sort of outside of Hopkinton on the legislative level. So I think I've picked up a lot of learnings that a lot of which really led me to run again, because I feel like I'm now, armed with all this information I didn't have 3 years ago. I wish I had it. I didn't. It just took experience and time. And I feel like I'm ready to apply it to the challenges that we're going to face. I'm just more prepared than I was before. So.
Okay, thank you. Meg, what do you feel are some of your biggest accomplishments as a current member of the school committee, and what would you like to accomplish in the future?
I think whatever accomplishments are related to me are related to the whole school committee, because we work in tandem. I think, one thing we've been able to do over the past 3 years is to increase awareness of the need to be sensitive to diversity in all of its forms, and to be sensitive to issues of equity. And I've been very lucky to have received training from the town, diversity training from 2 different groups. The first was visions. The second was an active bystander training. But I thought it was just fantastic to bring leaders and members of the town together for this kind of training. And I think it helps us as we move forward, shape a school that welcomes all children of all different ilks, so to speak. I think another accomplishment is we got the kids back in school full time in the middle of a pandemic. And it was really, really hard. But there are a lot of schools who didn't even manage to do that with the state mandate. And they applied for waivers, but we did not. And we worked very hard. And Amanda especially wrote 47,892 emails. I'm exaggerating, that's hyperbole, excuse me, in response to parents both disgruntled and pleased. And so I think one quality we've brought is perseverance. And I think to accomplish anything, what you first have to have is patience and perseverance. You have to be willing to accept negative comments and criticism, but still get up in the morning and still do your work. And so I think that that quality of perseverance, which sometimes is disguised as stubbornness, and patience and a real love of children will help keep propelling us forward as a committee, continuing to do the good kind of work that I really do believe we've done in the past 3 years.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're on to the last round of questions, believe it or not. And these are questions in relation to your candidate statements. Amanda, in your candidate statement, you mentioned you developed a school committee chair roundtable with area colleagues. Can you talk about what encouraged this idea and about the process of developing this communication?
Sure. As you know, we've had a lot to process this year, and each town in each of the 350 whatever towns in Massachusetts has approached this pandemic differently. And so what originally propelled me to do this is partly an interest in how my colleagues in other school committees were handling the varied issues. What things were decided by school committees, what things were operational, what things did how do we get together and challenge some of maybe the DESE standards or the mandates? I mean, what is it that we can do together, and what can we learn from each other? And it was just kind of feeling a little bit like our committee needed to have some connection to another committee that just got me motivated. So if once you join school committee, you realize there's a Mass Association of School Committees, MASC, is an organization that's our umbrella organization. We're divided into districts. So I sort of went down the district list. I know from other work that we've done, our peer communities that we tend to compare with, whether it's a tech school in the tech collaborative, or academic, sort of similarly academic schools or whatnot. So I sort of culled a list of, I think it was about 13 or 14, and I sort of bounced it off Dr. Kavanaugh and said, does this look like a good representative list? And, then I just sent emails and I said, hey, anybody want to maybe get together and chat? It's a tough year. And I mean, I barely hit send and my inbox was full. Yes, please, tomorrow, now, people were really desperate. I think we all need to help each other. This was unprecedented times, determining what is policy, what's operational. These kind of issues are important to a school committee because we have a certain amount of jurisdiction, and then a lot of that is just left to the superintendent, and those lines were very blurred in many cases. So anyway, I got great response. I thought maybe we would do it once or twice, and we all are continuing. And in fact, I just reached out to them this past week to ask them how things are going with the new quarantining guidelines. How are they doing? What are they hearing? Because again, we're hearing from the community both can they be looser and can they be tighter? We hear both. We get all these emails. So being able to reach out to colleagues and say, what is your experience, has been critical.
Terrific. Thank you. Megan, your candidate statement, you state, quote, the public school system should rise to meet each child's needs and can do so through a holistic approach, recognizing that what works for some might not work for others. Can you explain this and how you plan to help with this?
Thanks. That statement actually means a lot to me, not only because I'm the mother of a child with special needs, but I have great familiarity with kids with different learning approaches and differences. I have them as my students too at university. And I found that not one single approach as a teacher is going to help everybody in that classroom. And so I like how flexible our faculty are in Hopkinton and how well adapted they've become to integrating kids with different learning approaches in their classrooms. I attribute this to the strength of our Director of Student Services and also to the team chairs in each school. That each kid is seen completely and fully and as a person of great value, and not merely as someone with a disability or from a different background. I think we must fully address all of the colors and hues and temperatures of our students. But I think we can do this with our committee and our work on diversity and equity. But really, it's the individual child that's going to go out into the world and change it for better or worse. So if we don't attend to the complexity of our lives, we're shooting ourselves in our feet. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Jared, in your candidate statement, you state, quote, "We must continue to navigate the challenges presented by COVID, along with the considerable impact that remote learning has had on all learners." Can you explain what you mean by this and how you plan on helping with this?
Yes, Tom, thank you. So, we see now that our kids are back in school, and I think there's this tendency to say, we made it, it's over. I think, both Meg and Amanda have alluded to it today as well, that there's still a lot to do in regards to COVID. We're still talking about, whether we're talking about extracurricular activities, whether we're talking about group learning or reading buddies, or, even simply, sitting near friends at lunch. There's still a lot that we need to do in terms of COVID. What I think is really important, I don't know that Hopkinton needs to be on the leading edge of anything. I don't want to be the first school district to do, whether we're talking about kids sitting together at lunch or do away with masks or whatever. We don't need to be the leading edge, but I think it's also very important that we are progressive as we think about these changes, and that we don't sit back and wait for state mandated deadlines. We try to get ahead of that. We try to meet some of the approaches that some of our peer schools have made and the schools around us geographically have made, and try to get there as quickly as possible. I see it in my own children again, that there's social aspects, that it's, I have a kindergartner who's literally never seen a friend smile. She's never been in school and seen a kid smile. So that's tough to think about, and it's tough to think about, like, how to move past that. But again, not on the leading edge, but certainly don't want to be on the trailing edge either of decisions such as that.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, believe it or not, it is time for closing statements. So I'll give you each a minute to make a closing statement. Meg, we'll start off with you.
What is my closing statement? Well, I feel very grateful for this opportunity, even to run again for school committee, because I've learned so much, not only from the administration, but from my colleagues and the students. And I hope you'll continue to provide me with this opportunity to keep learning and to keep trying my best to do good things for the town. I mean, these are volunteer positions, and most of us have full-time jobs, and maybe that just tells you a little something about our passion for it, that we really are here to benefit others, not ourselves, or to pad our egos. So I hope you will have faith and trust in me as I have faith and trust in the community. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Jared, 1 minute to make a closing statement.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. So first of all, thank you very much, HCAM and Tom, for this evening. I think that just having this conversation, with Meg and Amanda, and just talking about the schools, I think it's comforting knowing that this conversation is coming from really a position of strength in terms of the school system, and then specifically in terms of the school committee. As I mentioned earlier, our school system is a source of pride for all of us in Hopkinton, and again, a reason why many of us moved to this town. So I believe I can make a positive difference with the school committee. I come at it certainly with less direct experience on the school committee, but in some ways I think that that's a positive in terms of a fresh perspective, and certainly look forward to continuing this conversation over the next couple of weeks. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Amanda, 1 minute for a closing statement.
Thank you. I just, first of all, I have to thank HCAM. I honestly do not know how you guys have covered every meeting, every sporting event, you guys are phenomenal. I feel like you must have an army of people I don't know about because you're everywhere. So thank you so much for this.
We don't know how we did it either, just for the record.
And it's unbelievable, really. It's such a service to the community, but sidebar. But I want to thank Jared and Meg for participating, and just having this opportunity, because I agree with Jared. It's a nice way to have a conversation and have the community hear us banter about these topics. It has been as I think I said in my statement, it's an honor and a huge responsibility to serve on school committee. And one that I take very seriously. I've spent a lot of time on the committee. I've been very fortunate to work with an amazing group of 4 other people. As Meg said, we're all very, very different. And as the community thinks about the school committee, I think that difference is a strength, because we don't all agree. We don't all see things the same way. And somehow out of that, I think, has come really positive outcomes. So I guess I should be saying just vote for me, but I guess that's my guidance to the community. I like that diversity. There's strength and diversity of opinion, at least on the committee. So I've been honored to serve. I would be honored to serve again. And I really hope people go to town meeting on Saturday. Can I give a plug for that? And also come out and vote.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Amanda, Meg, Jared, thank you so much for participating tonight. I think one thing is for sure, there are 3 very qualified candidates running for school committee this year. Well, that is going to conclude tonight's school committee debate. A big thank you to all of our candidates for participating, and also a thank you to the HCAM team for assisting in tonight's broadcast. We wish all 3 candidates the best of luck in this year's town election, and remind you to vote. Hopkinton's annual town election was rescheduled by the select board to Saturday, May 22nd at Hopkinton Middle School. And also Hopkinton's annual town meeting will take place this Saturday, May 8th at 9 a.m. at David M. Hughes Stadium at the high school. But for everybody at HCAM, I'm Tom Nappy. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you again soon.